Mind though.
The mastermind and the original idea came from Brian Williams in Helsinki at the time.
Okay.
And the reason it worked, I had spent a lot of time in Helsinki with the church, but he gathered up 8 of these new sort of converts and new people in the church, faces I'd never seen. And he set them up. One was Thomas Sullivan, Ruth's father, who was the interrogator, who I'd never seen. 2 of them were police in police uniforms, because one of them had a policeman as a father. So they got official police uniforms and a police car that they used to take me once I got past the border. One of them was an interrogating guy in a trench coat that had my documents and came out of the Russian embassy where I had been getting visas prior. So the car pulled up. So there were these 8 characters that made it believable. There also was an abandoned building that was being rehabbed, which was going to be the Sullivan's house. So it consisted of multiple rooms and a sort of labyrinth. And once they'd taken me and they stopped at the Russian embassy, he came out, I was in the back seat. He opened the briefcase and I could see from the back that he had copies of my passport. He had lots of information with Carl Stevens' name on it. It was in another language, but so they were setting the whole scale. They took Yuka Bordi, they pulled him over, who was driving me away from the border, and they spoke in Finnish and they said, he said, "What have I done?" When you pulled over, and they said, "You're okay, but we're looking for Carl Stevens." And he said, "Why?" And they said, "We've got some official business that we need." So they took me from his car, and he played in it like, "I guess I'll follow you." We came to this big gate, and they pushed some buttons, the cars went in. And of course I was trying to figure out what was happening. By the time they took me into this building and they led me from room to room with no lights, and they just stood inside the room. And there was no explanation. And then they would let the clock tick for a while, and then they would take me to the next. And so they were building the set.
Okay, were you starting to get the
I was nervous.
Yeah.
I was nervous, and I had concluded it was probably some sort of by that time I had taken many trips into Russia, to the underground church, and, let's say, illegal activity. So I assumed that it was some sort of contraband organization, but they were all Finns. I hadn't seen any Russians. So I was sort of getting agitated, like, these weak Finns, they've submitted to some, I wanted integrity and stuff involved, and it wasn't there. So I was getting sort of agitated and irritated at the Finns. But the last guy I thought was Russian. Thomas looks Russian. He has not a Finnish face, which might be long, but he has this round, big cheeked face. He looked Russian to me, so when I got into the last room, the 2 Finnish guards in the police uniform stood on the side, and they put me down on a bench, and there at the other end of the huge room was a big desk, a telephone, Russian cigarettes, a tape recorder, and my file. They put my file. And then Thomas Sullivan came in. He spoke in Russian. He picked up the phone, made a phone call. I understood some measure of Russian at that time, and was saying, "We have Carl Stevens, blah, blah, blah." Then the interrogations began, and he started asking if I knew Wormbrandt, if I had been to the Soviet Union, if I had had contact with believers in the Soviet Union. And this was the line of interrogation, but I didn't answer anything. I was terrified that the wrong data would slip out of my mouth, so I just sat. And it went on. My heart was pounding out of my chest, but I tried to look cool. He came over and offered me a cigarette, and I rejected it.
Why?
Well, because I don't smoke, but actually it's an interesting question, because I thought maybe part of my thing should be to smoke with him, but I didn't do that. And by the way, at the end, when it finished and they had no more questions to ask because I wasn't answering, he picked up the phone and he said, "Okay." And then he said, "Okay, since you'll not speak with me, we'll go to the next room." And I assumed that there would be beatings in there. So he took me, and I thought, "Oh my God, here we go." And I started imagining, because it was winter, my coat coming off, my sweater coming off, and them taking off my...
I'm getting raped or something.
No, but just beating me not through the clothes. So we went into the back room, and as they opened the door, there was Roger and about 15 of these church people that I knew. Now, Roger looked nervous as hell, because he didn't want the thing to happen to me. He thought, what if he snaps? But the first thing I thought when I got in there was, thank God I didn't take that cigarette. I mean, here's the whole entire church sitting in there, and here I am there smoking, turning in Christians. Oh yeah, oh schmucks, I'll give you their address. So anyway,